Hi, this is Chinmayi. Today on the channel, we are going to be speaking to somebody that I've been wanting to speak for a very long time. I have connected with her a while ago. I have dropped the ball quite a bit of times with regard to this interview. Today on our channel, we have Mansi Chaudhary from Pink Legal, this lovely Instagram page which educates women about their rights. Especially in this day, time and age, there are a lot of misconceptions, absolute ignorance, and especially with women and knowledge of the law is something. These are things that we are not taught in school. We don't know the difference between an FIR and a complaint. Where can we go? There are a lot of things that Pink Legal teaches you in a very, very simple manner, and they also have these very fun quizzes every once in a while to see if you have understood and and have followed the page and have learned these. So I have been following the page ever since they launched earlier in March this year, and it's truly an honor to be speaking to Mansi Chaudhary, an advocate, a lawyer, today on the channel. Thanks so much for coming, Mansi. Thank you so much. So you are a practicing lawyer, and from there to actually step into social media and to do something in the space of creating awareness is something that a lot of lawyers don't have the time or the inclination to do. Mostly it comes down to time, I guess, because I think going to courts and everything takes most of the time. So what actually drove you to something like this?
Firstly, I want to thank you, Chinmayi, for having me on your channel, and it is my honor as well to be, speaking to you, because you are somebody who a lot of women look up to tell them about their rights. And in fact, on Pink Legal, we constantly, if we ask somebody, tag a woman that inspires you, that you are the number one person who is tagged all the time.
Oh God!
So, it's my pleasure to be speaking to you, and to answer your question. So, yeah, law is a very demanding profession, and if you are in law, it takes up everything that you have. But ever since I was in law school, and I think even before that, I have been very, very passionate about women empowerment and gender rights. And I think it's something that comes from so deep within that I just could not do anything else but make time for this, because when you are so passionate, you somehow do find the time to do what you want to do. And this has been on my mind for a long time, but I got the impetus when I personally faced something. In 2017, I think 2017 was, when in Hyderabad, so I'm from Hyderabad, and I was driving home from work around 10 p.m. and there's a it's a city center, Jubilee Hills signal. So over there, there was this a car which was driving like crazy, and we had a small accident, and then these two boys came out and they just surrounded my car, and they were really aggressive. They started banging on my window. They tried to pull the door, tried to make me get down, and they were screaming, abusing. And I mean, this was a small minor, a bumper touched another bumper, and I felt so unsafe at that point of time. And luckily my car door was shut, but in case it was open, I don't want to think of what could have happened, and if they could have probably assaulted me physically. So this went on for a long time. They broke my side view mirrors, and there was nobody who came to intervene. So somehow I luckily had the presence of mind to take a picture of their car. So I had the number plate, and then I got home safe. And the next day I decided that, usually in India when this happens, people tell you that, okay, leave it. Now you are safe, so don't get into this. But I said, if I do that, I'm doing injustice to my profession, because I'm a lawyer and it will go against everything I stand for. So the very next day I went to the police station, I filed a complaint against them. And when I went to the police station, I was obviously very nervous because it was my first time, because as a lawyer you don't end up going to the police station. But I was what gave me reassurance was the fact that I know the law and I know what legal provisions will apply to these people, and I had written my own police complaint and given it to them, and I knew the procedure that the police have to follow. Right. So I could tell them that no, I could insist that you must take my complaint, give me the number, and then I could insist that I need the FIR, and then the FIR was lodged within 2 days, and I got a very good response from the police. So this whole, experience made me realize that how intimidating could it be for a girl who has no idea about her legal rights,
Right.
or who has no idea about what to do when you go to the police station, to actually take that step and file a complaint. And which is why so many people get away thinking that it's okay to do anything you want to
Right.
women, and we will just get away with it. So that gave me the push.
One of the things that, so in 2018 when I had named, my molester, one of the man who banned me is different from the man who molested me. But the man who banned me was also outed by a couple of others. He is the president of the dubbing union, and he had actually gone on stage and say, yeah, my name came in one list, I am waiting for that name. Go to court, it will take another 20 years. Right? So he had the guts to actually say, go to court. You can't pluck even a hair from my head. Literally, he speaks like that on stage also. So I think more than, even if there are people now who say, okay, fine, I'll take action, the process exhausts you, right? Going to court, and then you're sitting there, and you have of course you don't have to present yourself at court all the time, but I go there because I want to know what it is like. You listen to these arguments and they say random things, and sometimes I think more often than not, my really amazing lawyers, I think most times they're just turning back at me and saying, making eyes and saying, don't speak, because I think most times they're afraid that I'll get up and say something in court, right? And people don't understand, this guy is just lambasting me. On the other hand, this woman has no character, she's like this only, that guy. So when I was talking about this, they say, how can people speak like this in court? I said, they are hired to do it. He's going to do with that only. So I think one of the things that I wanted to, I learned also when I saw some of your posts is that I think some of us, maybe because we have gone to the police and done something, we know the difference between a complaint and an FIR, right? But it's only after you're reading your post that I realized that people don't know the difference. That I have lodged my complaint against Mr. Vairamuthu, but I haven't got an FIR. It's been almost 2 years and I don't have one. But that's how it works, right, in cases like that. So when let's talk about the laws that govern sexual harassment. What constitutes sexual harassment?
So sexual harassment, see, the popular understanding is that it's only physical when we think of sexual harassment, but actually the way law covers sexual harassment is physical, verbal and non-verbal. Physical is obvious, it's any kind of touch. Again, in physical we think that aggressive physical is only sexual harassment, but even like a tap on the shoulder or a graze on the thigh can be sexual harassment if it is without consent.
Right.
And then you have verbal, which is spoken words. For example, somebody is eve teasing you, somebody is calling you names, somebody is like cracking an adult joke in your presence in office,
right,
when a colleague. So this is also sexual harassment. And the non-verbal sexual harassment is basically gestures, body language, somebody staring at you, or somebody makes some vulgar faces at you.
Right.
So that will also be sexual harassment. So it's of 3 types. So basically it covers all kinds of sexual harassment if you think about it.
So if your colleague is watching porn in your presence, is that sexual harassment?
Yeah, it would be, because unless the colleague and you have a relationship where you are comfortable about it, then it's okay. But if you are not, then obviously it is sexual harassment. And in fact, making a woman watch porn or showing her porn is specifically written in the IPC, which is the Indian Penal Code, as sexual harassment.
Oh, okay. So this is with regard to women. One of the questions that I've always had is that what are the laws governing sexual harassment faced by men? Right, this is something that I think boys, especially young boys, minor boys, have no idea what to do if they have been molested by an adult of any gender. Are there laws where a boy or a man can actually go and file a case of rape, sodomy, or any of this that is available for the woman? Is it possible?
Yeah, so if you are under 18 years old, then you will be governed by POCSO, and any kind of sexual harassment, which is whether you are a boy or a girl, any gender, will be coming under that act, and that's quite a strict law. So definitely it prescribes very strict action to be taken. And plus, if you're under the age of 12, Then POCSO prescribes an even stricter punishment, like an aggravated. So it will consider any sexual assault against a child under 12 as an aggravated sexual assault. So where it will demand a stricter punishment, heavier fine, more number of years in the jail, so things like that. So that is for children below the age of 18, irrespective of gender. But once they cross the age of 18, there is no law as such in India at the moment which protects men against sexual harassment. So all the sexual harassment laws are as a man to a woman. Okay. So that is how they're drafted. So unfortunately we don't have a gender neutral sexual harassment law in India.
Right. So there is no way that a trans person or a non-binary person can actually go to the court of law and say, I have been raped, give me justice. Correct?
A trans person can. So recently the Transgender Persons Act was passed by the Parliament, I think this year itself in Jan. And that makes sexual abuse as an act of abuse against a transgender person, and they can get protection under that. But that's only for transgender, so it won't cover all LGBTQ people, but it will only cover transgender people.
Right. So especially even if it is intimate partner violence between, say, homosexual partners or same-sex partners, for a man to actually go and say that my male partner has assaulted me, or for a woman to go and say that my female partner has assaulted me. So all these laws are hopefully works in progress, do you think? Or nobody has even petitioned for something like that?
Yeah, I don't think at the moment there is anything going on for it.
So if a person needs to go and petition for a law, you need to ask for this law does not exist, and it does not give an equal. I mean, for the fact that there is no gender neutral sexual harassment law, it doesn't mean that men over the age of 18 or 19 or 21 are not poked and pinched, and this apparently happens in public transport a lot. A lot of boys, young men, complain of being sexually harassed in public transport also. So how can that come to pass? So if let's say I want to go and ask for a law that governs this, how does that work?
So I think the best way for a citizen to petition for a change in the law would be to file a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court. And so you basically put the petition, you ask the Supreme Court that this is a problem that we're facing and there is no law, so please direct the Parliament to pass a law. Like for example, how triple talaq, the Supreme Court directed the Parliament that you pass a law, and then the Parliament passed the legislation. So similarly you can use that method. I think that would be the best method, being a part of the legal system. That's what I would suggest. And secondly, then you have to approach like an MP or an independent member of Parliament I think
worst to petition them so that those papers can be passed, is it?
So then I think PIL would be the best.
I don't think they have not even come into terms of the fact that women can get raped, because there are these men from saying ladki ko aise aap sanskar se if you bring them up, ye rapes they'll stop happening, or tali dono haath se bachti hai. Like hello.
And stop them from eating Chinese food.
Chow mein. But the most interesting part about it is that the guy who spoke about chow mein has actually married a rape survivor, and he is asking for justice. He has actually changed a lot. It's quite a story of transformation. So there I think you see that there is the human being is capable of change that way. And that man now says that I will work till the end to get justice for my wife. He says that. It's strange. And I was like, this guy, I mean, we all outraged against him 5-6 years ago, but look at him now. So that's also happened.
There's hope.
Yeah, there is. I mean, especially from one of those guys from hinterland to come and say that, and then suddenly the chow mein vaje se rape ho rahe, and now he's saying, I will stand with my wife until she gets justice. I mean, it's like two ends of the pole. No, anyway, coming back, so an individual can go and file a petition with the PIL with the Supreme Court, and then that alone, I mean, can't you just stop there and hope that some MP will take cognizance? No? So
MP taking cognizance, they can do anyway. It has no connection with your PIL in the Supreme Court. Okay. But if you file a PIL and if the Supreme Court thinks that it is a matter that it should, look into, they will definitely take it up, and then they can either pass guidelines themselves till a law is implemented, or then they, direct the Parliament. And the just or like the treatment of your PIL
Right.
is also quite dependent on the judge who it goes to, because it's always you have some judges who are more liberal compared to others.
Right.
So like for example 377, if
Right.
it was initially it was cancelled, like it was made void. Then that judgment was reversed by the Delhi High Court.
Right.
And then the Supreme Court finally came and said that no, we are making that part void. So it depends from the forum that you get in the Supreme Court as well.
Okay, so if let's say today if we are looking for especially at POCSO laws, right? So there are a lot of these people, children who realize that they have been either groomed or coerced or abused or molested several years later after the incident, because it's a traumatic memory, it becomes repressed memory. And once into their adulthood, I think one fine day it surfaces, or they are aware of this happening. And is there a provision now for adults to actually go and file a case against somebody who molested them in their childhood?
Yeah, see, if the crime happened in your childhood, you can file a case against it at any point of time. So a crime doesn't have any time limit. At that okay, you can only have 3 years from the date to file a complaint. So you can do it in your adulthood as well, but the only problem would arise is for the execution of that complaint, because you don't have evidence by then, and you don't, so it's like your memory also might be a bit bleak. You may not remember exact details, which are very important for law.
Right.
Because once the case goes for prosecution, they will go into the details, and then they will try to find out 2 details which are not matching and say that we don't have enough proof against this person.
Right.
So that becomes the problem.
So, but the nature of the crime, as long as sexual harassment or domestic violence itself, as we were having this conversation earlier, that there aren't any witnesses to it. It is my word against the molesters, and it usually happens somewhere where it is surreptitious, that you don't, only know that it has happened, but others don't. Even if there is a crowd, there wouldn't be witnesses who will say, yes, I saw this happening to you. How does one go about, because one of the biggest reasons I think girls or boys have a problem, or anybody of any gender have a problem, is I don't have evidence. What if I'm not believed in court? What if people say this is fake, right? So that is the number one reason that people think that they need to have video and photographic evidence to present to court before you can actually go and file a case. So what would you tell to survivors of sexual harassment and even rape, right? Rape kits aren't presented, those samples aren't collected in time in India, and by the time it's only with circumstantial evidence that a lot of these cases are proven. I think rape kits are almost never administered in time, and even the samples collected are not stored properly, not transported properly. I think, was it your post or somebody else's? I think charge of custody, what was it? The samples, especially the samples that are collected from a rape victim, I think shift of custody or charge of custody, I think I saw this on Twitter. So who has the chain of custody of the samples, from who collected it to who took it to who went and lodged it, and under whose custody is it now? So all of this apparently affects the rape kit samples and everything else that is collected. So with sexual harassment, especially when it's about molesting, or there are no bodily fluids that are going to be there to provide evidence, how does one file a complaint, and how would you tell survivors to be confident to go ahead and file the complaint anyway?
So number one, I would say, although it's not fair to put the burden on the survivor, but just because of the way the system is, if it is a victim of rape, like if it's a survivor of rape, then the first thing you should go is ideally go for a medical examination. I know it's not the most natural thing you would want to do because of the trauma that's associated with it, but if you go for a medical examination, you will have the entire report and it will be much easier for you. Secondly, the common response is to go home, take a bath and everything. So
don't bathe.
Yeah, don't bathe, or like whatever clothes and all that, just keep it aside. Don't let anybody touch them. Keep it in a packet, don't touch any of that. And thirdly, I would say always confide in somebody so that you have that support, and write down all the details of the incident, because the devil is in the details, as we say in law as well. So the date, the time, where, who, what are the other things, like what were you wearing, what was the other person wearing, or what did you do before, what did you do after? Because if it goes to court, you will be asked these questions, and if you remember these details, then you will be able to answer them, and then the other side will not be able to find any sort of loopholes in your testimony. So do this. And even for other kinds of sexual harassment, I would say, if you are in a public place and if you think that it is safe and you are in a safe space, raise your voice then and there. If somebody, supposing you are in a metro or in the bus and somebody is groping you or trying to pinch you, just raise your voice then and there and confront the person, because most of the times these people do this with the confidence that nobody will speak up and I will get away with this. So the minute you raise your voice, they are taken aback and it's not something that they expect, and you can put a stop to it then and there. And if nothing else, you get witnesses around you, right? So if you raise a voice, 5 people have heard you, they've seen you. So tomorrow they become witnesses for you in court if you have to take this forward. So do that, but always do this judging all the circumstances, and only if you're in a crowded place and you are safe. Otherwise it could turn around against you. And secondly, so one is this, and second is write down all the details and confide in somebody and file a complaint as soon as possible, so that you don't waste any time in the legal proceedings starting. So once the ball is set into motion, it will keep going, but you have to set that ball into motion.
But more often than not, filing a police complaint is not the sole decision of the survivor. The family, the relatives, friends, everybody will weigh in and say, no need, why do you have to go? And then finally, after say a few months, the survivor just decides, okay, enough is enough, I'm going to do it anyway. So, so there's the reason for delay needs to be stipulated, right? So are these reasons of delay, for example, I was 19 when I was molested, and the man who molested me was extremely politically powerful. There was no option for me to, and I don't think sexual harassment laws were even as stringent as the post-Nirbhaya world that we are in today. They'll generally say, why are you coming and telling me about somebody who pinched you and hugged you? It's not as if he raped you. Police would say that. There are even people today who say that. He just pulled your hand, no, so what? So the thing is, what happens if it takes time for the survivor to not only heal from the trauma, number one, because a lot of people are stunned into silence, or they are processing that in a different way. Everybody doesn't process it in the same way, or the parents don't allow. If it's a girl, most often than not, they'll say that you have to get married, why do you want to do this? So then what? What if I want to do it later, when I believe that why should I stay silent?
So you are free to do it any time. So as I was saying earlier also, for a crime there is no time limit. So you can file the complaint even 5 years later, even 10 years later, whenever you want to. But I would say that write down everything. Even if you don't intend on filing a complaint, write this down, all the details, so that if you decide to file a complaint in the future, you have everything ready. 5 years later you will not remember what were you wearing, or what did you do before that, or who did you speak to, right? So write down all of this. And secondly, when you file an FIR also, there is a provision over there, if there is delay, then there's a reason for delay, and you can always fill in the reason for delay. So the law understands this, that you can file something belated. The only problem will be the prosecution, as I was mentioning.
Okay, so now let's speak about domestic violence. So we usually look at domestic violence as intimate partner violence, right? Usually now we are also having a lot of men's rights activists saying that we are not the only ones getting beaten up, we are also getting beaten up, and we don't have people listening to us. So that aside, domestic violence can also be, I found this post from you very, very interesting, where you said that when a spouse refuses financial support to the wife, then that's also domestic abuse. So what is considered as domestic abuse and domestic violence, and what about when the domestic violence you're facing from your home actually comes from your parent or your sibling?
So domestic violence is understood by law is of 4 types. One is physical, second is emotional. So emotional can mean, insulting, humiliating, taunting. So any kind of emotional trauma, families usually like end up doing that. And then third is financial. So where, supposing your spouse refuses to maintain you or to financially support you enough that you are able to, maintain yourself. This is applicable in cases of women who don't have any income, which is more, mostly the case, who women are not financially independent. And fourthly, even sexual abuse is considered domestic violence.
Okay.
So although marital rape is not considered rape, but sexual abuse in a marriage would also come under domestic violence. So that is where, you get the remedy.
Right. What is sexual abuse under marriage?
Any kind of sexual harassment, like physical forcing somebody to do any kind of sexual act. So all of this would come under sexual abuse, and that is considered violence, domestic violence. So there are these 4 types. And then for children, right? The second part of your question was?
No, if you are the ward, and if your domestic violence is coming either from your parents or from your spouse, by either withholding education or money, or locking you up in the house because you want to marry somebody else in a different caste, all of this, right? So when domestic abuse happens within the family, within your own, those who gave birth to you, or somebody who you are, just your own blood relative, rather than somebody that you are married to. So how does that work?
So that is also actually a very common, situation, and we get a lot of queries on Pink Legal also about it, where the parents are sort of like abusive towards the children,
right,
because they want to exert control.
Right.
So the interesting part about the Domestic Violence Act is that it protects women, right, and girls, but against domestic violence from any kind of family member. So it's not just your spouse; it can be your parents, it can be anybody with whom you are sharing a house.
Nice.
So any family member, whether it's your uncle, aunt, in-laws, brother, sister, anybody. So number one is, if your parents are being abusive to you as a child, as a girl child, then you will be protected under Domestic Violence Act. And secondly, you also have the Juvenile Justice and Care Act. And that act, it's gender neutral, it's for children below the age of 18. So that act says that if, a natural guardian or any guardian of a child, so parents are obviously considered the natural guardian.
Right.
And if they sort of, carry out any kind of physical or emotional harassment against a child, it will be considered cruelty under that act.
Wow.
So it's illegal.
Okay.
So, children have these 2 protections. So the girl child has a protection under the Juvenile Act plus Domestic Violence Act, and the male child has protection under the Juvenile Justice Act.
Okay. So somebody could actually go and file a case against their own parents if they, but then what happens? Let's say somebody is a minor. There are these 2 situations. So one's a minor and they want to go, so they'll be sent to a juvenile home, right? They'll no longer be in the protection of their parents, not in their home, but they'll be in a juvenile home. Is that how it is?
So it depends on case to case basis. Usually what happens is, if you go and file a complaint with the police, they'll first try to see if there's some sort of compromise that they can work out, because they would not want to stretch it, or they would want to protect the child with their own natural guardian. But if that is not happening, then the matter goes to court, and then the court will sort of say that, okay, this child has to be given to another guardian.
Right.
And then the court can appoint another guardian, either like if there's a close family relative, they can make, place the child in care of that relative, or then if there is nobody, then they will place them in the juvenile justice home, like the care homes rather.
Right. And what if somebody is an adult and they are not allowed an education, and they're forced to marry, or they're not allowed to, hold a job for whatever reasons that they want usually the daughter, to stay at home. So what are the remedies then?
So I would say the remedy would be, number one is to go and file a police complaint if possible, though I know it's difficult considering, you don't have, it's your own parents, plus you may not be independent enough,
right,
thought-wise and financially to go and do this.
Right.
But it would be ideal if you can, because that, again, as I told you, the police will intervene, and then they will sort of, try to place you in a better place, or try to warn the family not to do this again, or some sort of protection they will try to give you. If that's not possible, then you file a petition in court, asking for your rights, or asking to be separated from your parents, or asking for your right to education, because all this comes under your right to life.
Right.
And right to life means right to live with dignity. So you can also go and file a petition in the court against it. But that being said, on paper we have all these laws, but the actual implementation or even for somebody to take that step is very difficult considering our social and cultural fabric. So we have the law, but seeking the remedy of the law is not always
easy.
Yeah.
Interesting. So the work that you do with Pink Legal, you now have a team of lawyers who are working with you, and so you must be getting a lot of DMs asking for help. So how does that work? I mean, are you constantly answering people as to where to go, which police station to go to, what are the laws?
Yeah, so we get a lot of DMs, and surprisingly, most of them are about domestic violence, which was not something that I expected when I started Pink Legal.
Why not? I'm curious why not.
I thought that the most of them would be for sexual harassment, because in my opinion that was the most commonly faced issue, because the minute you step out of your house you face sexual harassment. I didn't know personally how deep this domestic violence issue is till I started Pink Legal and started receiving these queries. So we do get a lot of queries from distressed women, and we have a separate section on our website pinklegal.in where the contact us page, where we have a form called legal queries. And if you have a legal query, you can just go and put that query in that form, and then we answer the query for free to the whoever it is. We email them the legal query.
Oh, that's nice. So what's next for you? What's next for Pink Legal? Because I myself know how many people that I have referred to you, because most of them are like, I need help. Today I think somebody said their friend's sister she committed suicide because of domestic violence, and I refer them to you. So that's also one thing. So one of the things is that these cases are really gruesome, right? They're looking for whom can we go to, what can we do. I think she's murdered because of this. And we also don't know there's also a lot of speculation. So what's next for you as long as Pink Legal is concerned? What's next for you as a lawyer?
So the next is, till now we were answering legal queries through emails, but we realized that a lot of women want to actually speak to a lawyer and understand, just get like an idea of what are their legal remedies, and to understand whether they should go ahead and file a case or not.
Right.
So we are planning to provide consultation to women, online consultation, where they can speak to a lawyer for maybe 15-20 minutes, get an answer, and then if they want to further go and file a case, then we will help them connect with a lawyer as well. Because so we have an empaneled a panel of lawyers from all over India who are interested in providing services for women's rights. So then we match them along with the city and what is their area, whether it's domestic violence or whether it's divorce or whatever the area where they need help, we match them with the lawyer, and then we connect them to a lawyer. So this is how we want to further help women. So we start off with educating them about their rights, and then if they need our services, like if they need further help, this is how we want to help them.
Mansi, I am truly grateful for your time. Thank you so much for being here. And you know that I'm going to be saying, go to Pink Legal, go to Pink Legal, and go to Pink Legal. Thank you so much for your time. There are a lot of queries that were answered today. And if you're looking for any information or general knowledge about how the legal system works for you, what your rights are, how can you know your rights, follow pinklegal.in on Instagram. You can also follow their website and see, you can consult with them, take help from them. And until I see you in my next video, this is Chinmay saying bye-bye.